Hello and greetings from Iceland. My name is Gylfi and I will be your brutally honest guide while we explore Skagafjörður County and the town Sauðárkrókur, the history, horses and swing. So welcome to join me as we learn the truth about the country people in Iceland. We start the journey on a map overlooking the northwest region. The name Skagafjörður consists of two words, peninsula and fjord, and it is the fjord between those two peninsulas, 40 km deep and 15 km wide. There are 3 villages within this large municipality, and I have already covered the other 2, Hofsós and Varmahlíð. And before we land in Sauðárkrókur, it is only appropriate to look around in the countryside first. And this is where we start, and then we move north from here. And almost instantly we see that this is a good agricultural area, with plenty of good farmland between the mountains. Sheep farming is common, but horse breeding is the heart and soul around here. And in fact, this is the only district in Iceland where horses outnumber people. So it is often called the cradle of Icelandic horsemanship. Nowhere in Iceland has the history of humans and horses been so intertwined. And the popularity of the Icelandic horse extends far beyond this fjord and our country. The Icelandic horse breed has admirers all over the world. And the reason is that this breed originates from the Viking era, and due to our import restrictions, it has remained pure ever since. And many of the key ancestors of the Icelandic horse breed were born and raised here. So the horse farmers around here have good genetics to work from, so horse export is a big business now. And if I were to pick just one single location for those who want to be around the Icelandic horse when coming to Iceland, this would be it. There are horses wherever we look. Riding horses and pregnant mares and youngsters that have not been trained yet will be in the stable by mid-December, but this was shot late November, and the rest of the herd will be outside throughout the year. Since the Icelandic horse is strong by origin, it has a thick winter coat so they don't get cold, and as long as they are not hungry and they have a good shelter, this is what the horses prefer, or to stay outside where the freedom is. So it's no need to feel sorry for them. So let's head on north from here. And before we land in Sauðárkrókur, I wanted to do a short stopover, but don't think for a moment that those turf houses are reflecting the old way of living in Iceland. Those houses were Beverly Hills, the best turf in the country. And in fact, many of our ancestors would have been better off born as horses. At least they would have got a free winter coat. But the turf was, however, good for house insulation. It kept the cold out during winters and the heat out during summers. But that's about it. And most of the turf houses were poorly constructed, and when the nation could finally abandon them, we didn't look back. And that's the reason why we find so few of them today. There was simply nothing to miss. They were just a chapter that we wanted to put behind us. So let's travel to the present and get warm again, the modern geothermal way. And since we're here, I want to mention that every now and then I get questions about the ice-free spots we often see during winter, like in this case the running track. And there is hot water under there, running through plastic tubes. And many of our sidewalks are heated, but we could however do more of this. Energy is one of the things we have plenty of. But this was a detour. And note that I will be using both summer and winter footage in this video. And a part of the reason is that the tourist market is all for the picture-perfect stuff, but I'm more for the real stuff. Iceland as is, during all seasons. And the winter footage was shot during Christmas preparation, and the summer footage was shot in July 2022. So you get a bit of the both worlds, and there is plenty to talk about in this town. In the municipality Skagafjörður, which is quite large, we have 4,000 inhabitants, of which around 2,700 live here. And the town serves also as an educational center, and good as such, for the rural countryside around. And the town is big enough to keep tourists busy for more than few hours. So let's start with the town's name. Sauðárkrókur, and that name has actually been the subject of local mockery for decades due to the English translation, or Sheep River Hook, and that name derives from the local river, Sauðá, meaning sheep river, and a hook stands for the winding path along the river. So let's move into the town's history and work our way into the town's soul from there, starting by the harbor. That is where most Icelandic towns come to life or start to die. And Sauðárkrókur became a trading post in 1857 and took off from there, but they always had this limitation, or a poor harbor, which was bad as the town is facing the open north, the Arctic. So the town grew more as an agricultural village rather than to be a fishery village, since it wasn't until the 1930s when they squeezed out some money from the state to build this sea defense wall that still today is protecting the harbor, and they are still working on it, like you see. And the plan now is to get into the cruise ship market. The first cruise ship came here last summer, so they are obviously getting somewhere with that project. And transportation companies and museums and restaurants would gain a lot from it, and the town itself from harbor fees. So they are just opening up a new option in order to provide the larger towns and larger harbors with some competition. And that's good. So they have ambition around here, and I'm linking to the live cams on YouTube from the harbor. There aren't so many live cams from Iceland, so somebody might like it. And the harbor cameras are just as dull as many modern movies, so there is for sure market for content like that. But I won't be talking so much about the fishing industry this time. Such stories can be found in my other town videos, so instead I'm going to talk about the different industries that thrive well around here. In 1985, a factory was built here that produces rock wool from black basalt sand with shell fragments from the coastline around here. And that company has been very successful during all its history, so almost all houses are insulated with that fine product, and it is way better than turf. So they did a good job with that factory, and they are in export as well, just like one of my favorite companies in Iceland, also based in this town. And there we are into something completely different. This is fish leather, and yes, you heard me right. The tannery that makes this product was originally one of the old-fashioned companies that processed sheep hides, big market in the old days, a market that later would collapse. So they developed this tannery as a side business in the beginning, and they are mostly famous for processing fish skin. But they do also process lamb and reindeer leather, and I don't think that there is a skin in this world that they cannot turn into a high-quality product, like this exotic leather from a wolf fish, often with visible bite marks from other fish. So this is expensive, high-quality goods, often sold to major fashion brands, and designers use it often to spice up their own products. And then there are guys like me, and not so many years ago, I bought a bunch of this several times, and for a while I had my own line of cell phone cases, and I might actually go into that market again. But it's a long story behind that it doesn't belong in this video. But I am leaving a link to the factory, so you can see that fish leather is for real, and it's a good source of ideas for creative people. But there is, however, one company that stands out from them all in this town, and that is the local co-op. Strangely enough, since, like I mentioned in my other videos, the old co-ops were a big factor in smaller communities that would either stand or fall with them, and almost all the old co-ops went bankrupt years ago, everywhere but here. And not only did they survive, they grew into this progressive business empire that literally owns this town. And they are so progressive that they even own their own political party called the Progressive Party. And that connection opened up a whole new way for the co-op employees to grow with the company, like the guy at the petrol pumps. They made him into a foreign minister, so we can find the true and the juicy business stories all around that you just cannot make up. But let's move to tourism and what you can do around here. So I'm starting with TripAdvisor. That had way more options and better news for me than it offers while browsing through many of the small towns. Only yesterday, I was in a town just an hour away from here. And 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I couldn't even buy a hot dog in that town. But that's not the case here. Plenty of hotels and guest houses. And when it comes to museums, it's all about history. They have a Viking era museum. And not far away from town, we have the Hólar Cathedral, the oldest stone church in Iceland. And it's a place of significant importance for us Icelanders. One of our major historical sites. And as for nature, this is a beautiful place. And even offshore, we find 3 islands. And it's possible to visit them all during summer. And all of them are ideal for bird watchers. Like the smallest one is called Lundey, that means Puffin Island. Then we have another island called Málmey, that was inhabited until the 1960s. But the most famous is Drangey, towering in the middle of the fjord, looking very cold. Drangey is a place where the famous Icelandic outlaw Grettir Ásmundarson found a sanctuary, but only until his enemies finally got to him and ended that part of the ancient Icelandic Grettis saga. Skagafjörður is a place where the Viking clans fought the bloodiest battle ever to occur in our young country. 2,800 Vikings fighting each other. And those stories are so large that I can only do them justice in separate videos. It's just so much material to pick from when it comes to the history of Skagafjörður. So I could have made this video an hours long, but instead it gave me lots of ideas for my future work. But as for the more recent history and culture, like in many other counties in Iceland, the people in Skagafjörður have their own culture, not just involving horses. They have this thing called the Skagafjörður swing, and please don't misunderstand the swing. It's just this farmer that has entertained Icelanders for decades with his own distinctive swing tunes. And he never fails to get the people on the dance floor. So due to copyright issues, I'm just linking to some of his work. And they have also this man choir tradition around here that they have taken so far that in a way they have their own national anthem, or this ode to the fjord, that I'm also linking to. So what I'm more or less saying is that this is a place with a big soul. And as for me, it's not just the town and the fact that I can get something to eat there almost all the time. It's the surroundings that attract me again and again. And when we look around, we have the mighty Tröllaskagi Peninsula to the east. And in total, there are 4 road tunnels there, making it possible to cross the peninsula all year round. And to the west, we have this extremely rural peninsula called the Skagi. That's where the seals are. And we are by the so-called Arctic Coastway, which is a concept that can easily compete with the so-called Golden Circle back south. But it's just a way longer road and more diverse, like you can see in my other videos. And some of the bonus features around here are magnificent sunsets. And when it comes to northern lights during winter, we have this unhindered view to go with the northern light flow. And finally, this place isn't crowded with tourists. And I've said it before and I'm saying it again that it's a bit bad that we have those places completely saturated by tourism, like the South Coast, while regions like this get less attention than they deserve, in my opinion. And for those who want to get to know Iceland as is, the everyday life in Iceland and such, this and other such places that you can find in my town series are the places to go to get to see Iceland as is. And with that, I'm reminding you about the subscription button, since I'm adding new episodes almost every week now, making this by time the largest video source out there about my home country, Iceland.